Thanks, Athena, for sharing the slides, and welcome to this session of the RDA CODATA Data Systems, Tools and Services in Crisis Situations Working Group. I think we'll give it another minute or two. We are waiting eagerly for one of our speakers. But in the meantime, if you wouldn't mind signing into the collaborative notes document and putting your names there, that would be great. So I've just posted that in chat. Hopefully you can access that. The link to the notes is also on pretty much every slide. So it's at the bottom in the middle, the tiny URL link. So hopefully if you miss it in the group chat, you can just type that in. So within the Australian Research Data Commons, it's very usual to wait 3 minutes until after the hour. So we'll do that and then we'll get started, I think. And you will see the collaborative notes documents being posted a few more times while people come in. Nap, Athena. And Virginia, you haven't heard anything from Francis?
He's coming now. I've just got a message.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, it's 3 minutes past. Let's get started. So welcome to this session of the RDA CODATA Data Systems, Tools and Services in Crisis Situations Working Group. We've got quite a few people from the group here. My name is Stefanie Ketas. I work with the Australian Research Data Commons. I'm one of the co-chairs of the group. We also have Virginia Murray. Do you want to just say one sentence?
Thrilled to be here, Stephanie. My name is Virginia Murray. It's a wonderful partnership working with RDA and CODATA. It's a real privilege, and we look forward to sharing with you some of the exciting work that we're doing.
Thanks, Virginia. Nana, do you want to just say one sentence about yourself? Unmuted, preferably.
I work for Australian Research Data Commons as AI and data specialist. Happy to be involved. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Nana. We're still waiting for Francis, but Myra,
no,
do you just
he's arrived.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Myra, do you just want to say one sentence about yourself and then we'll cycle back to Francis?
Hi, everyone. Myra Cheng. I'm a colleague of Stephanie and Nana at the ARDC. Good to be with you all today. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you. Francis, good to see you. Would you like to just say one sentence, one short sentence about yourself?
Yes, I'm Francis Crawley. I work for Virginia Murray, and I'm also a member of this working group.
Thanks, Francis. And last but not least, our RDA Tiger support. Athena, do you want to just say one sentence?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Athena. I work for RDA Europe and the RDA Tiger project, and it's my privilege to facilitate the work of this working group. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Athena. We also have on the slide Borchak Basberg, but unfortunately she cannot make it. She had an unexpected emergency and can't come to this session. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks, Athena. So I'm not sure how many new RDA members we have here, but you may be aware of the 6 guiding principles that are at the heart of the RDA community, which are openness, consensus, harmonization, community-driven, non-profit and technology neutral, and inclusivity. There is more information about these principles on the RDA webpage if you would like to know more about them. Next slide, please. Okay, so just coming to the agenda of the session, we'll have a very brief welcome and a little bit on the group background. And then we have basically three major sections. One is presentations on the recent work that has been done by the working group. And that will be, we will talk to you about our long expected survey and interviews that we're planning to conduct in the near future. Virginia is going to talk to us about the outcomes from the UNESCO CODATA data policies in times of crisis facilitated by Open Science project, which is quite a mouthful. We usually call it DPTC, which is a bit faster. And we have a bit of time for discussion and feedback. And then we will come to the next part, which will talk a bit about translation from policy to practice with some key case studies prepared by Boczak, but presented by Virginia, kindly stepping in. And then we'll have a bit of a group discussion around some of the questions that we're interested in about how some of these practices could be applied in your contexts. And finally, we'll talk you through the draft structure for the final recommendation and have time for you to provide both feedback on the structure and also feedback and content for the actual recommendation, if you like. And then we'll hopefully have 5 minutes to just wrap up and talk about next steps. Next slide, please. So something about the logistics. If you have signed into the collaborative notes document, there's a link to this slide deck as well. So you can have a look at that, and all those links in there should be active in the slide deck. The collaborative notes you can access through the QR code or the link in the middle at the bottom of the slide. Please, we will be using the collaborative Google Doc quite a bit. If you struggle getting access to that, please let us know and we'll see what we can do. As you may be aware, this session is being recorded and the recording will be made publicly available. So if you would prefer not to appear on the video, please turn your camera off. If you would like to contribute, which we sincerely hope, you can either raise your hand through the Zoom reaction button and unmute to just talk, or you can also add comments to the chat or the collaborative notes. We'll monitor all of those and make sure that we respond. And yes, there's also, if you haven't done so yet, please have a look at our guiding principles and how to report a breach of the code of conduct at the top of the collaborative Google Doc. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about the working group background, and I invite all my working group members here to jump in if they would like. So the key aims are basically to assess the digital tool needs and challenges for key stakeholders during crisis situations. And stakeholders can include all kinds of people, including people at the coalface responding, can include policymakers, can include scientists, can include all kinds of people involved in crisis situations. We also want to describe 3 case studies to look at 3 specific areas. And as all RDA working groups, we want to provide a final recommendation. In our case, that will specify the characteristics of the data systems, tools, and services required by the various stakeholders in different crisis situations. Now, there's a strong collaboration with the UNESCO CODATA DPTC working group, which I know less about than many of my other group members here. So basically, those 2 groups work together quite collaboratively. And there's a little bit of a division of labor, if you like. So the UNESCO CODATA group, DPTC group, is producing policy guidance for scientists and policymakers. And Virginia will be talking quite a bit about that. And this group, the RDA CODATA working group, focuses on looking at the development of digital tools that are needed by scientists, policymakers, communities in addressing both the preparation for, the mitigation of, and the response to and the recovery from crisis. So all kinds of different phases, if you like, of a crisis. And also looking at the transformation of policy into digital action in the shape of systems, tools, and services. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour through the background. So we now come to the first significant part, if you like, of this session. And as Boczak unfortunately can't make it, I think Francis and Myra will be talking to us about the survey. Francis, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much. Myra, if it's okay with you, I'll go first on the survey and then you will come in with the interviews. Does that make good sense to you?
That'd be great. Thanks, Francis.
Thank you, Myra. So I'm filling in for Borchak, so it will be significantly less good than what it should be. I do want to thank, firstly and foremost, for this session. I think we all have to thank Stephanie, because Stephanie did all the work to put this session together, and we really, really appreciate that. So Stephanie, thank you very much. And we have to always remember Athena, because she's the real boss, and she's the one who makes sure that we get our work done and keeps us online and keeps us in track and keeps us being nice to one another too, which is a very good thing. So I just want to recognize that. So thank you, Athena, and thank you to everyone. We have a great group, and we're not too much different than our normal great group either here. But I think it does give us a good opportunity to run through what's important. And because of the great agenda, really, and sincerely, thank you to Stephanie putting this together. It really sums up everything we've been doing, I think, so far. So I'll talk about the survey. Maybe we'll go to the next slide. And again, on behalf of Borchak, because Borchak put these together here. So Borchak refers to the background to this, to our project, and that is really Borchak's own personal engagement, not personal, but professional engagement, I would say, very much with earthquakes and disasters around the world, as well as that of Virginia's strong engagement with these activities around the world. And our colleague Jackie as well is also engaged with disasters and so forth. So we have a number of people within the group that are engaged that way. And then we have a number of people who are like Stephanie, myself, and Nana, and Myra, more engaged on the data side or on the policy side or something like that. And the next slide, maybe. So what we wanted to do was to find out what's going on out in the world and find out what the real needs are for data, but not just data itself, but also for the systems, the tools, the services that are needed for people when they're addressing crisis situations. And very much thanks to Stephanie again. This working group started in somewhere in Sweden during the P21 session or P20 session or P22.
P20 in Gothenburg.
P20 in Gothenburg. Thank you, Stephanie. I was there, but you remember, so that's the good thing. And we had a small group there, and what we wanted to do was, under the leadership of Virginia, we had started working on this UNESCO CODATA, data policies for times of crisis, in order to put together, as Stephanie said, 3 policy guidances, which are now Virginia will talk about. And we thought, okay, we're doing that with UNESCO and CODATA, which is very good to do on the policy side. But we also thought, once we have these policies, we have to implement them. And in order to implement them, we have to be able to work with the technologies that are going to actually implement or use the policies, as well as the people. So we thought RDA would be really a very good place to look at these technologies. And that's what this survey wants to do, is to look at the technologies that are out there. Maybe the next slide, please. Thank you. So we have 37 questions, which the working group put together. We're trying to understand, as I said, the different types of tools, services, systems that disaster scientists and also policymakers, but those are related, those who actually, let's say more, this survey really goes to the technology side to understand what the technological, digital technologies are that we need in order to address these 3 phases of crisis, emergencies, or disasters. And then we have about 30 minutes time to do that. Next slide, please. So it's not a simple survey. We have consent, which is in the introduction. And so in order to complete the survey, in order to move actually to the questions of the survey, you have to tick I consent. Very much thanks both to Jackie and to Borchak. We now have ethics approval. Jackie worked with her ethics committee in Australia, and Borchak worked with hers in Ankara. And we had the approval from the one from Ankara, so we didn't continue to work with the one in Australia because it didn't seem to be necessary. This took almost 6 months. There is, please, everyone, there's a question in the Whova about your experiences with ethics committees. Please say something there. Last month, the RDA Council decided it would set up an ethics task group. It hasn't been set up yet, but Hillary, who is the Secretary General, she's informed me, and Athena knows too, that they will set up a task group to look at this and to look at how RDA can be more proactive in the area of ethics. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for this within the council, and I hope across CODATA. But please answer that question in the Whova so that we can get some feedback there. And then we're ready to go now, and we're ready to launch the survey. Now, this survey, maybe the next slide here. What is expected to tell us is what type of data needed, the data sets that are available, and the kinds of timelines that it takes for collecting data and how data is collected, whether it's collected real time or near real time, one-time snapshot. So we're trying to figure out what people actually do with the data, how they manage the data, how they collect the data, how they store the data, what systems they're using, and that's basically what's inside this survey. Next slide, please. So, and then more questions about how flexible our data systems are, how stakeholders can access those data systems, very good question. The role of advanced digital technologies, data quality challenges and solutions, and the data ethics. And if I recall correctly, these are the headers for each of the different sections that we have within the survey. Next slide, please. So before I turn over to Myra to talk about the interviews, I just want to inform you. So I think, and you'll hear this with regard to the survey, you'll hear this also after Virginia speaks or while she's speaking. We're getting into a very good place with UNESCO. And we're getting, let's say, not the end of the work that we're doing with UNESCO, but we're getting to the end of the drafting process. So we should have text in hand shortly, hopefully. And when we have that, then it's all about the implementation. So hopefully we can continue to work with UNESCO, with CODATA, certainly across the RDA community. And also there's a G20 project on disaster risk reduction. It's a small G20 project, but we'll also try to integrate it with that. And that's being led from out of Africa. So I think we have a very good, let's say, set of people that we can go to for the survey. And we also have a strong background to it. So we will revise the introduction to the survey in order to just make it clear that we have the G20 partners there too. And also, and then we will inform the ethics committee. We don't have to go back for approval, I believe, but only just inform them of that. And then we will launch this survey. And I think we should discuss after Virginia presents and we get through, Myra presents, and Nana presents and so forth, then we can come back to a discussion of just how we launch the survey if there's time here. Myra, thank you for being patient, and thank you to everyone for listening.
Thanks very much, Francis. I'm just going to discuss this component of our research project. So we have an online survey and the online interviews. So participants could either choose to do one or the other, or they could do both. So for this part, we're just looking at about 10 interviews, and I'll put our draft interview questions in the collaborative notes. So if you have comments, that would be really helpful. And if you have suggestions on who we could contact as potential participants, that would be as well. So the idea behind the interviews was really to invite participants to elaborate on their experiences, and if they could help us to discuss a case study, which we will write up at the end to illustrate learnings from previous disasters and the responses, and how we could draw from people on the ground in their what they've learned and what data requirements would they need and the technologies that could support. That's all from me. So I'll hand it over to Virginia for the next part of this.
Thanks, Mara.
Myra, if I could just compliment what you said, and thank you for presenting that. Myra is the one who really stepped up to the plate and said she would organize interviews, she's organized the questions already, put all of this together. And then thanks to Myra, we also included in the survey question at the end for people, would you like to be interviewed? So that the survey can also help to generate these interviews. And again, very much thanks to Myra. And somebody else also worked a bit on this with her, maybe Nana, but I don't recall. But in any event, we have a very good start with that too. So I'm sure Athena helped. Virginia.
Thanks.
Sir.
Thanks, Francis. Virginia, over to you. We're running a little bit behind schedule, but I think we can keep going.
Stephanie, thank you so much. Thank you to Nana. Thank you very much, Athena, for being such a rock with the RDA CODATA project, as Francis has said. And Francis and Mara, thank you very much for your messages. And good to have colleagues online. I'm going to talk about the outcomes from the UNESCO CODATA data policies in times of crisis facilitated by Open Science, that mouthful of a project, which actually to us who work in disasters and disaster risk reduction has been key to how we try and understand how we build the knowledge about these events. I work for the UK Health Security Agency in the UK. I'm the head of Global Disaster Risk Reduction and have a few other roles that you can see below. So if we go to the next slide, I just want to remind you that disasters are there. This is a series of images just from last week. So the first one is about Myanmar. The first one just shows the impact of the earthquake that happened there and the collapse of this building that was built relatively recently. And you can see it pancaked, and a lot of people struggled to get out. But at the same time in the US, there was a most massive ice storm, and in Canada, leaving about 500,000 customers without power. And the consequence of no power is the medication can't be saved in fridges if you're a diabetic, and other things can go wrong. So we don't know the health impacts yet, we don't know the long-term consequences. There's a real concern in India and around the world about any factory that makes fireworks and other explosives. Very sadly, last week in Gujarat, a firework cracker blast occurred and killed a series of workers. But if we turn to Malaysia, there was something even more frightening, where dozens were in hospital in Malaysia after a blaze from a gas pipeline. And you can just see the heat of the fire and just know that it was really difficult. But how many were affected is something we need to consider. And my final example is from South America, where not only are humans affected, but on this occasion, many cows were affected, which of course is the livelihood for people in Bolivia with the flooding in the Amazon region. Last year, the Amazon was in drought. This time it's in flood. So it makes it very hard for people to plan what to do next. So these disasters are really difficult to deal with, and the data is often very weak. So let's tell you a bit more about what we've been trying to do. Data policy for times of crisis is something that was picked up very much by the Committee on Data from the International Science Council, and I'm so grateful to everybody who's been involved. And it's lovely that Stephanie and Nana joined us really in 2023, trying to work this thinking through about how we might make it more acceptable and accessible for many. A whole series of project deliverables were included, and there was a vast discussion about what we did. So on the next slide, you will see that we have a timeline, and this takes you from this first major symposium we had at UNESCO in 2023, which was followed then by a big consultative meeting, having worked really hard for the following 15 months, that was held in Geneva, where we tried to get everybody together to discuss it and got hugely useful feedback. And the feedback was then tasked to look at what we had done on the toolkit that UNESCO will be publishing with CODATA for a fact sheet, a guidance note, and a checklist. And if you go back, thank you so much, Athena, then the consultation was launched, as I will show you, in October. We had a deadline for feedback in January this year, then held a webinar to review so many of the different consequences, and over 500 people applied to join the webinar, and I think we had about 250 there. It was amazing, wasn't it, Francis? Then only a couple of weeks ago, there was a soft launch at UNESCO during the incredible Global Science Ministerial Dialogue on Science Diplomacy at UNESCO. And they have now been sharing it with the executive committee for the UN member states at UNESCO, I think only this week. What we're aiming for is a harder launch, a proper launch, which will occur at the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in early June this year, where all the UN member states who have adopted the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction and who are required, therefore, to implement the reporting on data. So that's really a very exciting timeline and a really good way of trying to share that. And we thank UNESCO for that slide. So how did we do the consultation? Well, this is what the message went out, and we had a lot of replies on the consultation. But again, this constant message that disasters happen, that's what's driving this. And it's trying to get how we can work with all the data scientists of the world more effectively to try and answer these questions. And if we move on, you will then see that this is our webinar, and you can see that's what happened next. And then the outcome has been these 3 draft documents: the fact sheet, the guidance, and the checklist. They're all pretty brief. They follow very much the style of UNESCO, who led on open science in their launch in 2021, and it's been absolutely key. But what we've done with these tools is to try and pull them together to link to other things, such as the United Nations Office of Disaster Risk Reduction International Science Council Hazard Information Profile. So we know what the hazards are of the world, and this was published in 2021 with the 2 documents you see on the left. And I've had the privilege of being the chair of the steering group for updating these, which will be relaunched, re-updated in June 2025 at the Global Platform. So really key. So how does this all come together? With the help of UNDRR, as you'll see on the next slide, we are going to take this into the heart of the new disaster losses and damage tracking system that will be used by UN member states across the world to try and report on all the hazards that they are then experiencing, so that we understand what the impacts are as we move towards 2030, when these huge UN landmark agreements of the Sendai Framework, of the Sustainable Development Goals, and hopefully the Paris Agreement will be refreshed and renewed and taken forward by the United Nations. An incredible story, but what a contribution this will be. Thank you. Stephanie, back to you.
Thanks very much, Virginia. Athena, I think we have time for a little bit of discussion, questions, and any feedback anyone would like to provide. So we've bombarded you with quite a bit of information. If you would like to comment on the survey and the interviews, if you would like to provide some comments in the collaborative notes document where we have the interview questions, apologies, I just noticed my video was off. Or if you would like to ask any questions or comment on what Virginia just presented about the outcomes from the DPTC project, please feel free to raise your hand or add things into the collaborative notes document if you prefer. Francis.
Yes, I had a thought in the beginning of this. Virginia has pointed out in the beginning of her presentation how important, at least we believe, our work is, because we do believe that this will contribute to, frankly, saving lives, helping people in very bad times, preventing these kinds of things to a certain extent, or mitigating them to a certain extent. But Stephanie, if you would permit, I'd like to go back to the top of this, very top of this slide deck, to the second slide. We know that the work we're doing here very much fits in with the UNESCO SDGs, which is critical for RDA. And we know it also fits in almost perfectly, I think, with the United Nations Pact for the Future. But I just wanted to say it also fits in with the fundamental principles that we saw on the second slide here from RDA. And I think we are, in a certain sense, trying to do the work of the RDA. Also, we plan to have a launch of these documents during the first week of June in Geneva, during a meeting of the UNDRR. I would like, at a certain point, maybe not right away, but if Virginia wants to, I would like Virginia to talk about that meeting and to talk about why that meeting itself is important and why the work we're doing in the context of that meeting is important as well. So those are my thoughts here.
Virginia, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Francis. The global platforms for disaster risk reduction are incredible meetings. It brings together all the UN member states and many of the ministerial and other contacts inside each government. A lot of the experts, the scientific focal points, the national disaster management agencies come to these meetings, and that's a huge gathering of really committed professionals who are very anxious to reduce the impact of these disasters. It also brings together about 40 or 50 of the United Nations or intergovernmental agencies together who work with and to support the UN member states to try and deliver this. Behind that, you have many of the international non-governmental organizations and some national governmental organizations who come to bring the experience, what it's like to deal with these events in the front line, but preferably increasingly trying to improve the resilience of nations to manage these events. Because climate seems to be a driver, climate change seems to be a driver of the frequency of these events, and they seem to be getting more and more frequent. And just by showing those first 5, it's sample of really major events that have happened. Just at the beginning of my talk, you can see how difficult it is to manage these events. So there are well over 4,000 people who come together, and a lot of this is shared online. And these events provide the focal point for taking the next step forward about how we can try and understand the impact of disasters, but also trying to improve the resilience of nations to manage these events, which is really important because they're not going to disappear. And that knowledge is going to be increasingly important to try and pull things together in a way that hopefully will improve the lives and livelihoods of people right at the front line. And that is very much our aim. So it's trying to build that knowledge together in these incredible fora that we come out with very strong messages that go back to the United Nations, but also go to the UN member states for action and delivery. And the whole purpose of the delivery is really by measuring what happens. So the idea of a disaster loss and damage tracking system is something that's been much discussed, much shared. There's been very many attempts to try and do it better, but we believe this time we'll have a much more of a dynamic living system that the UN member states start reporting on, which will, by that reporting, help to engage with others to try and build funds to try and reduce those impacts if those incidents are to happen again. For instance, there was a huge call for action by the UN Secretary General on the impact of extreme heat. And we know that heat waves are a real issue across the world, and we need to plan for these. So it's trying to pull all that together, Francis, that it becomes so important. And it will be lovely I will be there anyway, because I'm going as part of the UK government delegation, but we'll also be there to try and support the work we've been doing in sharing that, but the other work we've been doing on reviewing the hazard information profiles and how that delivers material that will really help nation states as well as individuals right at the front line to plan for their futures. So Francis, it's quite an experience to go to these, and I can certainly put into the chat the hyperlink for what the global platform is, and you can investigate it yourself if that would be useful. Thank you for the opportunity of sharing that, Stephanie.
That would be great, Virginia, if you could put the link into chat. Thank you very much.
Stephanie, if I could add something to that as well. Yesterday, I participated in a webinar with Sir Peter Gluckman, who is the president of the International Science Council. And he was addressing the members of the International Science Council and laying out their plans for the coming work and the plans that would be brought to the board of the International Science Council to eventually approve. And one of the 3 points that was at the top of the agenda was science in crises. And this is also something that the International Science Council is working on closely. Virginia knows this better than me too, but working on very closely with UNESCO. And I don't want to overplay what we're doing, because what we're doing is just one cog in a huge wheel that needs to turn and needs to work. But we want to get that cog to fit on that wheel as well as we can, and to make sure it does the work and contributes the best way it can as well. And by the way, Sir Peter also mentioned that he had been in discussions with the European Commissioner responsible for crises as well. So there's real coordination going on in this area, globally, but also, and why I wanted to point out with the ISC is because this is really, ISC does to a certain extent represent science at the global level. So this is, we're in a good place with the work we're doing. We have to do good work. We need the survey. We need the interviews. We need the white paper that we're going to get to. And I'll stop again. No.
Thanks, Francis. And one thing we haven't probably said often enough, if you are interested in filling in the survey, or if you're interested in disseminating the survey, or if you're interested in being interviewed, please let us know in the collaborative notes document. So you can put your names down there. Myra provided some text there about suggestions. If you would like to suggest yourself, you can certainly do that as well. Thanks very much. And I think we'll move on to the next section, which would be the translation from policy to practice. Again, unfortunately, Burçak can't be here. She prepared the slides, but Virginia will be talking to them. So thanks very much, Virginia, for stepping in.
Stephanie, thank you. Burçak always says that science goes on during a crisis. Data has to flow during crises. Data policies, we think, are increasingly critical and crucial to make sure that the data is used fairly. So translation from policy to practice is really key. Next slide, please. Earthquakes are a very serious risk in Turkey. This is the map where the fault lines sit in Turkey, and you can see that it's very heavily affected in Turkey. And of course, only in February 2023, you'll see all the green earthquakes that occurred around those fault lines and what happened. And you can see that the lines were really massive in February 2023. And there were two particularly major earthquakes that happened on a Monday, one in the middle of the night and the second one during the day. So we had people at home asleep who were suddenly affected by this dreadful earthquake, followed by another one as people were starting to rescue those who had been affected. So let's have a look at some of the images, please, Athena. Next slide. It affected 11 provinces. 15 million people affected. It was a multi-hazard event, which were cascading and complex. It was multi-sectoral and it was multidisciplinary. There were so many people that were really hurt, and I'm sure many of you will remember some of the news coverage. So let's look at the images, Athena, if we might, that Bajak put together. The top left shows that a tented housing area was needed. But a tenting housing area, as you can see, burns if you have kerosene heaters that aren't managed safely and they get knocked over. So on the top left, you see a fire. On the top right, you see the consequences of that fire and the smoke and the damage that occurred. And then you can see on the right-hand side below a series of tents that were put together, but the area is very, very wet and flooded because they were actually put in an area of a floodplain. And at one point, the flooding was so bad that people had to use boats to get around, as you can see in the bottom left. So you have not just the earthquake, you have fire, you have flood, and you have real risks to people who are trying to escape from something so difficult. Next slide, please. These are just some of the images of what happened to the buildings. This is in Antakya, and you can see the damage and the destruction and the fact that probably well over 50,000 people are thought to have died. Really terrifying and very shocking. And the consequences of this has been absolutely huge. Next slide, please, Athena. They have started rebuilding. They have started building for the people who need to live there and want to stay there. And you can see the hard work that is going on and the huge commitment to the recovery that is in place. Next slide, please. One of the areas that is particularly worrying is not only the tented housing and how you recover that, and the new blocks of flats and other places that are being built. There is the opportunity, as you see on the bottom right-hand side, to build smaller houses that are at ground level, which are possibly safer, but it makes the city very, very much bigger. And of course, there's this huge impact on places like hospitals. And this was one of the hospitals that the hospitals were really good, but one of the hospitals was badly damaged, and this is their recovering of it. So real issues about how to manage this for the people, for their lives, livelihoods, their health, their schools, their way of living. Really dramatic. Next slide, please. I now hand over to Nana, because we need to try and take these principles together and see how we can work more closely with you. If we could, please. Nana.
Thank you, Virginia. So, so at this stage, so you have been presented with the fire, storm, water, earthquake, and everything, and the need for us to discuss and find solutions for this through data tool systems and other tools available to us humans. So I suggest that we take a look at some of these questions as a group and potentially discuss or reflect and discuss on firstly the case studies presented by Virginia. And so in this case studies, what are these challenges that you foresee in translating these crisis data policies into practice? that is within your community or within the organization or other context that you are able to remember or articulate.
Can I just suggest, Athena, would it be possible to share that particular section of the collaborative notes document on the screen so we can have a look at the questions there and people can write into them or can speak up or can put stuff into the chat?
That would be wonderful, yes.
Thanks, Athena.
No problem. Let me share the right. Okay. Just let me.
If you could go, oh, that's great. Thank you. I can read that. So hopefully everyone can read that. My eyesight's not the best. If you could go down to section 2, I think it is. So a bit further down. That's the interview questions. Yeah, keep going. And then a little bit further, a little bit further. There we go. So these are the questions. Yeah. Yes, great. Wonderful. So these are the questions that I think we wanted to discuss, and I think Nana is going to moderate that particular discussion. So feel free to contribute either by writing into the document, by speaking up, or by putting your comments into chat if you have problems accessing the Google Doc, for example.
Yeah.
Thank
you. I also paste the link to the Google Doc here once again. So what are the challenges that you foresee in translating these policies? Even a short phrase would get us started, I think. And those who are willing to speak, please do. Otherwise, we can also work in silence or rather type as somebody speaks. So yeah, there we are. Thank you, Athena, to get started. And so just drawing on the collective knowledge, maybe could I ask Virginia and to just step in and give us your thought about the challenges.
So if you consider the difficulty in trying to pull the data policies into action is that for every different organization, there are probably many data sets you need to use to pull the data together that you need. And that is a huge task, but you have to do it in a very timely and as honest, transparent, open, truthful approach you possibly can to make sure that the data is as correct and as appropriate as possible, but also does not breach an individual's privacy. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to try and pull together this information, because you have to share it up through your government systems, through your international networks, to be able to make better decisions about how things are managed. In the health domain, we have something that is very powerful, which is mandated by the World Health Organization and adopted and agreed to by over 190 UN member states. It's called the International Health Regulations. And this requires reporting in a timely fashion, often daily, for any hazard of real note of any infectious disease in particular. So diseases such as COVID-19, SARS, sudden acute respiratory syndrome, MERS, the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, things that are truly infectious and really frightening for many people to know how to manage, where we may not necessarily have antiviral treatments that will work immediately, and we may need to work very hard to build vaccinations to protect people. So the international health regulations mean that health has a very clear system of how it reports on the health, on the diseases, and to some extent on the disasters and the impacts on health from these events. But there's no equivalent system that I think is really important across many of the other domains. So it's not essential to report on the number of deaths, although the media are very powerful in helping to collect the data from places like Turkey or from Myanmar, with terrible earthquakes and sharing the data where we can, but it's really difficult pulling that data together quickly and really knowing what's going on. Working across different sectors from health to economics to agriculture to education in many countries is difficult because different systems have been set up over the years. So it's working across sectors are really tricky, and trying to get people to pull that data together in a way that is consistent and clear is complicated. So from the health point of view, we have the international health regulations within countries. There are systems, but they are very much led by the individual governments and how they're dealt with. And that's why the national disaster management agencies are so key, that they have some of the resources to do that. But trying to get the data policies to make sure that the data has consistent values and principles that makes accessing that data in real time is increasingly important. And that's one of the reasons why we have been working so wonderfully well, but also so hard with the Committee on Data for the International Science Council, CODATA, and our wonderful partners, UNESCO, who have been so committed to open science to make sure that we can access what is needed in times of crisis. So really in pulling this in the round in a way that people feel confident will deliver something that is going to be useful. Francis, I know you'll have a really good way of describing this because you, from the data point of view, you are much more articulate than I am, but it would be really good to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, thank you, Virginia. And as you know, I would love to talk. I talk all the time. But Martina is here, Ashish is here, Catherine is here, Leo, Stephanie is here, Sophie is here, and Miguel is here as well. Martina has been also very much involved with our working group as well. And Martina, would you want to give us your perspective on, let's say, how well we're doing, if we're moving along, and how we're addressing these questions, particularly on the translation of policy into action, because I think you are one of the people too in Germany who is also very much always looking at how to translate policy into technical standards, technical activities.
Well, thanks, Francis. I think you overestimate my role in Germany, but I am, of course, interested as one of the managers of the IPCC Data Distribution Center to really make our data available to policy providers and also to the general public, because our data is underpinning the climate reports. So it's not only of interest to policymakers, but also the general public in the end. I think you are doing a good job in the broad approach that you do, because it's including so many different stakeholders. Even the group reflects that. So we have those who are really working in crisis situations. Then there are politicians which are not really in the field, but can help with data advice. And I think you do a better job in that perspective to get everyone involved than many other groups. And I think this will be key for the take-up. So you need everyone. Policy is important to support in the background, to get it, to get a visibility in the end, but you need all the people in the field to support it in the end.
Thank you, Martina.
Thank you.
That's a nice word. I wanted to ask Ashish. Ashish is in New Delhi, and of course, there is one disaster after another in India, as there is in almost every place in the world today. Ashish, did you have any thoughts on the questions that we're addressing here today? And we'll give Ashish some time to reflect. And Katarina Rial, would you like to jump in? You don't have to, but just put you on the spot.
Well, it's tricky because this really isn't my area. So I was interested to find out what was happening, but I don't really have any input, I'm afraid.
That's okay.
So
You're
I
welcome
work
to.
for a
Yes.
I work for a research facility in Germany. So we're quite far removed from this, but I just thought the session sounded interesting. So, which it has been. Thank you.
Well,
Could you
thanks
tell us,
for coming.
Catherine, could you tell us something about the work you do? Just
So I'm a data steward working with data management team for a research facility. So we're a synchrotron, which means we produce X-rays or bright light, I think mostly X-rays at our facility, for other people to come and test whatever it is they want to bring. So there certainly was research done at the facility for during COVID on possible drugs and treatments and all that kind of thing. So we can be involved, but we're certainly not sort of frontline as a crisis is happening. And I said I'm involved for the company that's running this and managing it. I'm not I'm not there doing the science and the testing myself. So
okay,
yeah,
but
so we certainly can be involved as things develop and as further research is needed, but yeah, not sort of in the moment.
well, we're going to get you in a moment. Don't run away. I want to ask you
Okay.
something. You probably work quite a bit with data management plans. That's my guess. And you're probably coordinating data management plans, helping people put them together, making sure that they're working, checking them, and things like that. Is that true?
I am beginning to be. I mean, I've only been in my role about 18 months, so it's still relatively new to me. But yes, that is something that we deal with.
Yeah. So what we're introducing is something kind of new here. And I think this is important. We're introducing data policies. And the reason we're doing this is because when there's a disaster, when there's a crisis somewhere, it involves so many organizations, or even before and after the crisis, it involves so many organizations from different sectors, from different countries, uh, different disciplines. And what we were thinking, and you can correct this, but is that the data management plans are more or less limited because they're constrained very much by what's required within an organization, what's required within a country, or here in Europe, what's required in Europe as well. So, in Germany or here in Belgium, when we make a data management plan, we have to first look at which university we're working with, which hospital we're working with. Then we have to look at the Belgium regulation. Then we have to look at the EU regulation. And we have to make sure that our data management plan fits in with that. But that doesn't allow us necessarily to coordinate with somebody who's in Turkey or somebody maybe even in Germany as easily, because you will have your own requirements for your data management plan. So we thought that these data policies could be kind of a bridge between the data management plans. Does that make sense at all?
It does. I mean, certainly anything we do, the sort of guiding authority is our institute data policy. Obviously, anything that goes against that data policy isn't something we can offer. So yes, and other institutes, other organisations would have different policies. So something that links those certainly helps. I'm involved in a project that's bringing 4 different institutes together. Now we're all under the same parent company, so we all have similar policies already, which helps.
Right.
But rather than a data management plan, we have a very similar sounding document of data management architecture and plan, so DMAP. And the idea of that is that it's a living and changing document. So it sets out from at the beginning what the plan was and how we plan to bring these organizations together to be working in the same way, given the differences in data policies. And then over the course of the project, it's being updated every sort of 6 months to reflect what's actually happened, or if ideas have changed, or if roadblocks have been thrown up. So it's a bit more flexible through the course of the project.
That's really interesting. And you know, so I have two thoughts on that. Thank goodness you're here. The first thought is that's what we're looking for in the survey, actually, is to try to understand the architecture that people have for their data systems, tools, and services in order that we can, let's say, implement the policies into the architecture. So that's one thought. And the second one is, can we steal your policy and architecture plan? Is there any way we can like get a peek at it? Can we pay for it? Do you take Bitcoin, gold? I don't know what you take. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's something we would sell. I mean, as a sort of partly government-funded research institute in Germany, a lot of what we have is open anyway. I would have to check specifically on this, how far outside of the organizations I can share this, or if there is a version of it that I could share.
Yeah, then connect with Athena. She'll put her email, I think, in the chat. And if you can do it, it would be fantastic for us because we would learn from it. And as Virginia said, we are trying to figure out how to go from policy into really architecture, into the implementation, into technologies.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
for us, as a lot of it was simply understanding the technologies that we've got involved, and how we can link them together and where we can find common ground. That was going somewhere. I've lost my train of thought.
Yeah, well, we're going the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so we're trying to find the common ground, which is why we're looking at the architecture. And we have for how our institutes work, we've structured that around the workflow. So literally go through effectively a timeline of how people apply to do the experiment, what they need to do in advance, what actually happens when they turn up, what's happening to the data at the end. So we've structured it in a timeline order, in a workflow order, because that's the thing that we found all of the institutes involved have in common. There are slight differences, but approximately things have to happen. You can't measure a sample until you've turned up with a sample, and you have to fill in any safety information for that before you turn up with it. And so, so there's definitely things there that have helped, because originally it was just a lot of ideas and it was restructured to be in this workflow order, and that really helped us to see what was happening better.
Okay, so anything you can steal, like at the end of the day, today when you go home, put it in your briefcase, take it with you, send it to Athena. She has a lot of Bitcoin, so that'll work well. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's fantastic. Good. Leo, would you like to say something?
Not much, but I also come from a data stewardship background, and I think in our context, whenever there's a disaster, the response teams are often situated within local government, and what we often find is there is a lack of technical capacity to work with data first. So it's a challenge because that capacity resides with the research institutions and poor integration and collaboration across between government and the research institutions is a bit of a problem. And I think the other thing is, even when we can mobilize data, poor interoperability between systems is often an issue as well. So, yeah, lack
Leo,
of
where are you from?
standardization.
Where
South Africa.
Ah, very good. Okay, well, you guys are going to host the G20, so we're going to come and invade your backyard in Pretoria. Yeah, that's very good. Where are you in South Africa?
I'm based in Cape Town.
Okay. Are you at the university?
I work for an environmental observation network. It's not a university, but it is a research organization.
Okay, please connect with Athena so that we can get you on board here. Because I liked what you said. You know, it is in a certain sense the responsibility of government, right? And we all love our governments. There's no question about that. Okay, but it's also a kind of cooperation. Very often when things happen between civil society and government to get things done. And I think that's what we tried to do with the data policies too, and is to make a bridge between different kinds of organizations who are involved, are active, both in in prevention, in response, and in recovery. So, yeah. Thank you very much, Leo. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, did you want to say something?
Hi. Yeah. So there's an awful lot that I could start talking about. I'll try and summarize it. I just literally hopped into the group because I was interested and able to get on after breakfast. At the moment, I'm working in an IT services department, but I'm affiliated to a multi-institution geoscience research centre in Ireland. And so the idea of linking into stuff like Destiny and this kind of stuff at the European level for emergency response and data kind of cubes and that kind of stuff is an area of interest to me, but also the idea of at a much more basic level, trying to get data sharing between different institutions, the different legal entities in the country. However, I had a question here because in a previous role, in a previous life, if you like, I actually managed a radiation monitoring network, shipping data to the EU and then onto the IAEA. And so we were integrated with the National Emergency Response kind of setup. So I wanted to ask, the kind of thing that I've been hearing you talking about is in place at a government level, and there are treaty mandated organizations looking after data sharing for critical sort of emergency response type data and sample collection. How much are you involved, or how much are you looking at that side of it, or is it really kind of focused on the academic research side?
I think, Virginia, this is a difficult. This question is way above my pay level. I'd like to ask Virginia to respond if she could.
That sounds truly exciting, Chris, that you've got that engagement. It would be really helpful if you could share a link with us so we could encourage you to do the survey and possibly be interviewed. Your help would be absolutely incredible. And I think trying to bring this together with the people who've been listening would make this so much richer, what we're trying to do. I love the fact you were running a radiation survey network. Very important. I mean, your experience would be invaluable to us.
Well,
how you manage to
I don't know. I mean, so basically, it would be good just to get in touch and sort of. At the moment, the group is looking at just conducting a survey of folks that have some background in this and interest, right?
Mm. And just learning more about how we can really implement this toolkit from UNESCO and CODATA, if at all possible. And how would it work for you? Would it actually deliver what you need? Would it help to engage your partners in helping you to find the answers and your colleagues in times of crisis, both by preparing for, during, and recovering from? So it'd be wonderful to have your engagement if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not, like I say, that was a previous role, the kind of main interest, so you can maybe comment on based on that, but and then talk about the current more academically focused one.
That would be fantastic. Is it possible to share your email with the team?
Yeah. I'll just pop it up. I'm in obviously email you, but I'll.
But that would be truly kind.
Yeah, great. I can see you're signing into our collaborative notes document. That's wonderful. Thank you.
No, that was me.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Do you have a link to the document, actually?
Yes, we do.
I will post it.
You need to repost if Chris came in later. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
That's fine. So
There
if you
we are.
can't click on
Brilliant.
that, we have a short link as well, in case you have any problems with that.
Chris, I just
Cool,
want
thank
to
you.
say the hard nut in the world to crack is the one you mentioned today. It's the data sharing. We all agree, all of us agree. There's nobody in this room who does not want to share data. Probably nobody in the room who does share data too. So it's really hard to do it. And I'll put it in the chat, but we have a project on data sharing using data visitation in another working group. So I'll put that in the chat for you just to over.
Yeah, I saw you talking about that at the ag
Okay,
session yesterday.
You
Cool.
got the propaganda already. Okay, that's good. Stephanie, I'll stop talking.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. I think we have another 19 minutes left, so I think we'll just come to the last part of the session. Athena, would you be able to share these slides again? Feel free to keep putting stuff into the document. That's perfectly okay. We can do that.
Sorry, I was just managing my tabs. Apologies for the delay.
That's okay.
Let me
There's always too many tabs.
let me put it full screen again. All right, there we go.
Thank you. Okay, so for the final bit of the session, we just wanted to briefly walk you through the draft structure of the final recommendation that the working group is planning to deliver at the end of the year, hopefully at the International Data Week in October in 2025 in Brisbane. So that's the plan. I don't know why I have 2.A there, but we'll just go with that. Thank you, Google Docs. Okay, so I hope this is readable. There's quite a lot on that screen. So this is basically the proposed structure that we've come up with. So having an introduction with an impact statement. So what's the impact of this recommendation? What is its contribution to the United States Sustainable Development Goals? And some of that information we actually have already in our case statement, which is now called a statement of work. Then we have a couple of case studies that we want to describe, each with a description of what we're talking about and key findings, informed by our survey, hopefully, but also by the knowledge of the people in the group. So we had talked about 3 case studies: the COVID-19 pandemic, cyclone disaster management, and earthquakes. And I think Francis proposed a 4th, water resilience, which I don't know much about, but Francis would probably be able to provide quite a bit of content on. Then we want to have a section on our survey, which we will hopefully be running over the next couple of months, reporting basically the key findings and gap analysis. And the survey would include the interviews that we're running more or less in parallel as well. And from basically this work, we would like to describe the characteristics of data systems, tools, and services in crisis situations. So what are core attributes and how do they relate to the data research lifecycle? And then finally, we want to come to basically the core of the recommendation, which is recommendations for the implementation of data systems, tools, and services in crisis situations. So what are best practices and what is the stakeholder collaboration needed? And then we would have a section on capacity building and future research directions, including a sustainability plan and further adopters. And finally, we'd have basically a conclusion and call to action. So what can people do? And finally, well, we'd have a section of references. We'd also have an abstract, but we would write that basically at the end and append it at the front. So that is basically the structure we've been thinking about. Which is quite a lot. If you could go to the next slide, please. So again, it would be great if you could go to the collaborative notes document. This QR code will take you to a different section in the collaborative notes document. And it would be great if we could have a quick chat about what you think of this structure, whether you have any suggestions to amend the structure, and also whether you have any suggestions for content that you could link us to, provide us with, or have any comments on that you would like to share. Athena, could we go to the collaborative notes again? Thank you. It's a bit messy having to swap between tabs, I know. So thanks for your help. Okay, and again, we invite you to either speak up or put comments into chat, or basically put comments into the document as it is, and we can discuss them here.
So as Stephanie said, this white paper at the end, as we're calling it now, is more or less our major output. And it'll be based largely on the survey, the interviews, and also some, I think it will be very limited landscaping. But then it also will incorporate the findings that we have from the work that Virginia is leading on the UNESCO CODATA data policies for times of crisis. And I really would encourage, Chris, and I know Ashish is driving at the moment, and Leo and Katerina, to also consider contributing to this with us as well. It's as you can see here, it's just a bare bones outline in a certain sense at the moment. We will try to bring it with us to P25, the RDA plenary 25 in Brisbane, in Stephanie and Nana's and Myra's backyard this October. But everybody's really welcome to join the working group and join the work. And again, there's a lot of Bitcoin to go around for everyone, so please consider. Yeah.
So Ashish was having problems with the link on the phone. Does anyone else have any problems accessing the file?
Mm.
Okay.
I can get.
All right. So I actually suggested that we should put the connection to the work of the DPTC projects quite explicitly and prominently, probably in the introduction.
Stephanie?
Yep.
I just want to respond to a comment as she had put in the chat about ownership and federation. So just as an example, Australia is a federated has a federal system of government. So we usually have we have three levels of government, so local, state, and Commonwealth. And as a consequence, the data that gets collected is very much fragmented. And what one of the problems we have here is bushfires. So what one of the resources which had been developed was to bring together all the data sets on bushfires held by different governments and agencies. And as a consequence, the ARTC, working with partners, has been able to develop a resource. So, and that has been quite a significant piece of work, because it covers quite a large volume of data sets, or it's just amalgamating a lot of data sets. And so consequently, we have data sets covering, I think, more than a century, across time. So it's quite a substantial resource. And that's been, it was released recently, and it's being used by a range of people in the community. So in ways that we wouldn't have anticipated. So that's particularly important. So just to, so that's an example, I would say, of capacity building and sharing data by planning ahead and bringing together different partners. But Stephanie and Anna might want to add to it, because I think there were some really interesting applications of this particular data.
Sorry, I just put a link into chat, which is, I think, what you were mentioning, Myra. That's the page with resources for bushfire researchers that came out of a program by the Australian Research Data Commons called Bushfire Data Challenges. Is that the one you meant?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So I can certainly talk a little bit about it. So that came out of our Translational Research Data Challenges program, which basically the idea of that is to take a societal problem, in this case bushfires, identify some of the research challenges that need to be addressed to be able to tackle aspects of the societal problem. And then we worked with a lot of consultations to find out what the data challenges were that were inhibiting the research. And then we worked together with organizations, relevant or key parties, basically, to address the data challenges so that we could enable the research, so that that research could then address aspects of bushfires, in this case, aspects of the societal problem. And one of the outcomes from that program is a resources page, which I've put into chat, which has some resources for bushfire researchers. And that includes a historic fire map, I think, that is integrated in the Digital Atlas of Australia. Is that what it's called? I'm looking at Myra.
Sorry, that possibly could be right, because I guess it's a mapping system.
Yeah.
But I haven't gone into it myself.
Okay. Yeah, there's basically, we had about a dozen bushfire projects in this program, and most of them have produced something either together with other projects or on their own that provides basically capacity building and resources for bushfire researchers.
I guess I wanted to bring it up just to illustrate that if other jurisdictions are having problems with having a federal system of government, that's one methodology you could use to bring data sets together and facilitate sharing.
It was difficult. And I think there was a lot of work done to try and basically uplift data from some of the states. Some states had really good data. Some states and territories had less evolved data or slightly different data. So different standards were a problem, different legal situations, etc., etc. So that was actually quite an effort to bring some of that data together.
Right. Thanks, Stephanie.
Sorry, that was not one of our case studies, but might be of interest.
Yeah.
I think it's also, Ashish will have to speak himself, but I think in a way it's a similar situation in India too, where the states have played a very big role within the federated system in India under the central government, and then also the localities and the local, many different groups of people as well. So yeah, there's probably a lot of commonality that you could find between Australia and India, these structures.
Okay. So we are pretty much nearly at time. I think we've got another 5 minutes. Oh, thanks, Ashish, for putting putting more content in. That's great. We'll definitely keep that in our document as well. Yes, thank you.
Stephanie,
So,
I just want to say
yeah.
what Ashish says here is really important, because that's really what the core of what we're addressing in a certain sense is these lacunas, the lack of data, and the lack of data at the time when you need it to make decisions, both before, during, and after crises. And very often it's not that the data is not there even. It's just that either it's not accessible, or people don't know it, or it's not coordinated, or something like that.
Yes, that's a very good point. I'll just put this somewhere. Sorry, I'll just put that
I've
here.
done that.
Oh, great. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Alrighty.
Wonderful. Thanks.
So,
So yeah, Nana, keep going.
in terms of the recommendation structure, maybe I was going to suggest, is there anything that is missing, any areas of omission or commission that somebody might want to add to? And so that would be probably what we are looking for, Francis, right?
Yeah, this is a first guess, and there are smarter people in the room now than there were before with us. I just wanted to remark something too. I noticed that there are approximately 7 billion, I think, closer to 8 now, I'm not sure, missing today from our Zoom meeting. So we're only a small group of the totality of people that should be here on our planet, but we have really good people, really exceptional people, and really good people that participated too. And I think this was, for me, also, Stephanie, it's really good to have to report back. So thank you again for putting this together, because it makes us bring together everything we're doing, and Athena as well. It makes us bring together everything we're doing and also be able to present it. And that really does move things along for us and also help us understand where we're going. And the feedback that we received today is, I think, really valuable. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Thanks very much. So we're nearly at time. Athena, would you be able to go back to the slides? Sorry for bouncing you along. We just have just basically our 2-minute wrap up and basically the next steps. Okay, could you, I think yeah, okay, I think that might be the slide. So thanks everybody for your contributions. Oops, please, can you go back? No? Okay. So
I think it's that one, right? Yes.
Sorry,
Stephanie.
Probably, yes, you're right. Okay, so just to show you what we're planning to do next, we have basically 3 blocks of work. We want to disseminate the survey and interviews and disseminate the survey and analyze the survey, of course, once we have the results. We will probably slightly later, but that depends a little bit on when we get people, whether we get people to interview through the survey or separately, conduct about 10 interviews and also analyze those interviews. And the third block of work is basically to finalize the recommendation structure and start working on the recommendation. And then the next steps will be to present the recommendation, which will have the survey and the interviews feeding into the content, and collect feedback at International Data Week 2025 in mid-October this year. And then hopefully we'll receive feedback both there and from the group through the group mailing list. Hopefully we will then incorporate feedback. And so the plan is to submit the recommendation for RDA endorsement by the end of the year. We hope we'll manage that, but yeah, it's an ambitious timeline, let's say. Next slide, please, Athena. Thanks. So basically what we would like you to do, if you can, is feel free to provide further comments, feedback, etc. in the collaborative notes even after the session. So that document will stay accessible and you're welcome to add more of your comments. If you would like to contribute to the group, so if you would like to join our monthly meetings, disseminate the survey, let us know about others we should send our survey to. If you would like to contribute to our Zotro library, which is where we capture the references that will go into the recommendation. If you would like to contribute to the recommendation or provide any other comments, feedback, etc., please join the group if you haven't done so yet. And if you have specific feedback you would like to provide, Athena, apologies, I've put your email there. I hope that's okay. So if you would like to make contact with us or provide any specific feedback, then please email Athena and she will forward it to us, hopefully. Other than that, we also have, at least I have my email address in the collaborative notes document. I think some of my co-chairs will have their email addresses there too. Feel free to use those as well to get in touch with us. And with that, we're 1 minute over, and I would like to thank you for coming to the session and hope that you have a great rest of your day, however long that might be. And thanks very much again, Athena, for helping us with the session and driving all the slides and the collaborative notes document.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you very much.
everyone. It was a great session. We'll be in touch. Enjoy the rest of the plenary.
you.
See you
Thank
around.
you.
Bye.
Bye.